Hello and welcome to CVG's post-Xbox reveal reaction show. I'm Dan Dawkins, former editor of Xbox World and co-host of the League of Next Gentlemen. I'm joined by Tim Clark, who's Group Senior Editor of Games.
Hello.
And by Tim Weaver, who's another ex-editor of Xbox World.
Hello.
Well, wow, minutes ago we just finished watching the Xbox reveal, and I say wow because there's an awful lot to talk about. And I don't know if it's entirely positive, but it's definitely exciting. We'll kick straight in. Tim, what did you think of it?
I'm still trying to sort of compute it really. And we said in the preview show that anything over that length of time, there tends to be sort of some quite jagged highs and lows. I thought they kicked off fairly strongly by showing the actual box. They were always going to show the actual box. The name, which I'm sure we'll come to, is interesting. I'm still kind of slightly unsure, as I am unsure of a lot of it, whether I think it's a good idea or not. My overall impression, trying to kind of like trying to formulate one quite quickly, is that I think it will be an interesting and powerful system, and it will do a lot of the kind of. They're very clearly going after a broader entertainment consumer, and I'm sure it'll be pretty good at doing that. If you came into it with a kind of a games hat on, as I'm sure the three of us did, it was kind of a mess really in terms of the messages I took away from it. I didn't find much of the game content compelling at all.
Okay, in the spirit of the show, CVG, change presenter. That means you, Tim.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were looking at the TV there, Dan. My impressions, I thought it was not that surprising. I think that it was obvious that they were going to play heavily on the multimedia aspect of it. The fact that it's going to do all things that you want it to do, TV and films and music and that kind of thing. It's been long rumoured that that's going to be the case, and I didn't think that was too surprising that it leaned heavily on that. I agree with Tim. I think the games portion of it was pretty disappointing. I mean, I counted 5 games that they talked about, one of which got leaked about an hour before anyway, so I think it was a mix of. I think the actual machine looks really powerful, and the actual design of it looks quite nice. It looks actually like a sort of Sky Decoder kind of vibe to it, which is
PVR, wasn't it?
Which is what they're after. So I wasn't surprised by it, but at the same time I was a little bit disappointed by it.
Tim Edwards, once of this parish on PC Gaming, made a nice point on Twitter where he said if this was being announced as Apple TV, all the kind of the pane switching and would people be more kind of well disposed for it towards it, because they were really trying to talk up this idea of changing the way you watch and consume entertainment. And I thought one of the things it chimed with nicely, Dan, was what you said in the preview show about the idea of being able to have Twitter up while you were doing something else, or that whole kind of second screen stuff, but on one screen. And as someone who plays like a lot of PC games personally with 2 monitors, I can see the attraction of that. But what I didn't quite see was there was this notion of, oh, well, if you're in the middle of watching Star Trek, then your mum's on the Skype, but you might want to switch to listening to an album. You could also be playing a game at the same time. I know we're all like, attention spans are now at kind of 0 nanoseconds, but I don't know if that's genuinely solving a problem that exists. They kind of were saying, oh, the living room's too slow and you've got too much stuff. I kind of agree with that, but
yeah, I don't think anyone likes, say, menu lag. We complain about it in FIFA, but in reality, like, are you so attention-addled that you're like, music, film, no, internet, no, music, film, internet, blah, 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 blah. You're not going to do that. It's just not.
I think that was more to show off the capabilities of the new Kinect as well, which is obviously forming such a huge part of the system.
But is it solving like a real problem that's there? Is your problem now that you can't reach the controller button fast enough to change channel?
But is any of that really solving any problems that we had? It's not, is it? I mean, I don't know that any next generation. Listen, I'm not defending it, but because I agree with you to a certain extent. But I think that they're onto a bit of a loser whatever way they do it, because they want to show off the multimedia aspects of it and the quick changing and being able to have picture-in-picture and all that sort of stuff. It's a nice extra, and I think they have to show that off in order to show what their sort of multimedia system is capable of doing. But I think the problem with the show is that it's not structured how we as gamers wanted it to be structured, and we wanted the Halo, the Forza, we wanted it all up front so we could see it, and then
I think the tech's really nice, full stop, and I'm certainly not down on that. I think that stuff is good. And I was saying in the preview thing that what the box looks like, and as Tim says, it's it's a fairly glamorous looking black box. I think that's why Sony sort of said, well, of course it's a black box when they were quizzed as to why they didn't show theirs. That's only been proved true by what Microsoft did, but the TV stuff and the end stuff is all cool. My concern as someone who lives in the UK is that Microsoft have talked up a lot of this sort of stuff before, and they were showing off their kind of NBA fantasy baller stuff and the kind of tie up with other US sports, and that stuff traditionally doesn't have a good track record of making it, or equivalent deals appearing in Europe. Certainly not on the same sort of time frame. And unless they kind of roll that stuff out with Sky over here or with someone like Opta, then how much of that kind of functionality are we actually going to get?
I think that is a worry. I do think that is a worry, because they were very slow in getting that on the Xbox 360, very slow in getting that kind of thing up and going. Having said that, at the end of Xbox 360's life, they have now Sky and Netflix and all the other kind of bits and bobs that go with it. So there's no reason why those partnerships, I'm assuming, can't
you'd expect it to
move through. You know, I'm sort of caught between the two sides really. I can understand why they wanted to show all that stuff, because you can't underestimate how big the multimedia side is to them. This is their play to replace your Sky decoder.
There was no ambiguity about that presentation in terms of that. It was the complete antithesis in terms of presentation style to what Sony had delivered. I mean, let's drill down into what they showed and the things, each bits that sort of surprised us. First of all, the name Xbox One. Well, nobody saw that coming. The entire world missed that.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to Tim off air, I mean, I don't even really know what I think of it. I don't know. I thought just calling it Xbox would make a lot more sense, because that is the brand. They're going to try and be all things to all people. Using the umbrella brand makes sense, but the Xbox One, I mean, I assume it's because it's one. You only need one unit,
one device, one device to rule them all.
Do you think somewhere there's a whiteboard with Xbox None crossed out?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, as I said, is it 719 times worse than the original plan, which was the Xbox
that's
plan.
right. Yeah, I don't know what I think of it really.
I think it's one of those things that once you've bedded it in a bit. I mean, I remember Nintendo announcing they were going to have a console called Wii, and people were running around this office like laughing their balls clean off. But now it sort of seems fine. So I don't think it's a ludicrous name. I think we'll get used to it. I don't know what I always called the original Xbox the Xbox One, so I don't know what I call that now. Xbox Classic, perhaps.
Yeah.
But the name will be fine. And I think I'd have been a little bit underwhelmed if it was just called Xbox. I think you needed that little flash of newness a bit, so people can, when you're talking about it in a conversation, it's obviously something different. But so yeah, I was pleased there.
Yeah, the thing that impressed me most really was the fact that nobody guessed. And I think in today's world you expect someone to know what they guessed, and we were all crowing to ourselves as we do, like minutes before, going, it's clearly called Xbox then. And then minutes later made to look quite daft by, what was a really nice piece of hidden showmanship, I guess. What I also thought was quite nice with the Xbox and the One, the way they split it, that sort of splitting seemed to be echoed throughout the presentation. Even the way the machine split down the middle, the serrations and the smoother side. The Kinect looks almost split. The PIP thing it just felt like they was trying to show you the multi-channelity of it, which is a word I've invented and isn't real.
It's a good word though.
Yeah, the machine itself, we sort of touched on what we thought of the looks of it. Is there much to add beyond it being just a nice looking PVR?
I guess we can talk about the actual kind of bits and bobs, I guess. I mean, it's interesting that they've gone with Blu-ray, having kind of fought shy of that. But games still at this point have to come on disc. They're huge enterprises in terms of like storage space. We saw it had the HDMI in. We talked about on the back. We've got guys over in at the reveal now.
I think we might have a picture of that here, Tim.
Tim could bring that up.
Fantastic.
My beautiful assistant.
Right.
Yeah, there's just snapped right now. If you point at bits.
Point some bits, Tim.
HDMI in.
Yeah.
HDMI out. What does that say? Optical? No. I can't read it.
I got really nervous when they talked about having a relationship with my television and console, what the extra inputs might be.
That is where the sex tentacle gets inserted.
2 USBs.
Yeah,
I'm struggling to read it from this angle, to be honest.
I mean, it's a piece of industrial design. It's kind of fairly nondescript. If you took the Xbox badging off and said it was a high-end media server or hi-fi amp, you'd believe it, wouldn't you? But
it's not. I don't know that it's
cool enough.
I don't know that it's aesthetically as pleasing as perhaps the Xbox 360 is, but I think it's built. It's obviously it's packing quite a lot under the hood. It's more. It looks to me more this kind of size than that size. It's quite big and bulky.
There's something like hideous but iconic about the first Xbox. Like it's a horrible bulky piece of kit, but it is like the giant X was very of its time, and that sort of. This feels like at the moment like a slightly more nondescript but safe play in terms of the console. You know, I quite like it. You know, I quite like the design of it.
There's a fundamental thing these days that if they're going off to like a really mainstream consumer and you're expecting devices to be placed in the living room, they have to be fairly they have to come from that world of skyboxes. I'm sure that's very deliberate why it looks like that.
Do you remember the original concept of the Xbox when it was literally a silver giant X?
Yeah.
I think like idiots like us still wished it had looked
but
like
again, you know, my wife may be less keen on the giant silver X that run. If you know, giant X change television channel, it might it might be quite bad.
Do either of you still feel like there's any of that? Because there was a lot of that kind of Xbox Go Home, which didn't seem funny to the people there, but like swiftly everyone on the internet was going Xbox Go Home, you're drunk. Yeah. And like, I don't know, will the Kinect side of it, do you anticipate being sensitive enough and not awkward enough that you'll be comfortable using it?
Let's put it this way, Kinect, and I know that it has its defenders, but Kinect has been pretty much a disaster. I mean, I bought one day one, took it home.
Not sales-wise though, right?
No, not sales-wise, but
functionally.
But
software-wise.
Software-wise, you can only play about two or three games on it and have them actually work properly. I took one home day one for my daughter basically, and the games I got for them, they just spaz out all the time. You know, you don't get to play the game properly, and when you've got kids, they're instantly out as soon as it stops.
It's connection failure.
So number one priority for the new Kinect is that it has to track your movements better and it has to react to what you do better. If they get that right, then they've got the best of both worlds, because the voice recognition on the original Kinect was always good. It was pretty good, you know.
So you don't think you'll get kind of false signals being sent like while you're kind of playing a game and tries to switch it to the TV?
Because the Kinect at the moment does that, so that is a danger.
Am I right to say, from what they were suggesting in that presentation, they were talking about the way it would react to different voices within the family?
Yeah.
Could it be something like, if my son comes in the room and goes, activate the red hot X channel, it's going to lock it out because it knows that he's a young man, as opposed to daddy who may want something else.
It's taken a dark turn quite a good.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, in theory, could it do that kind of thing, do we think? Or was there anything else in the Kinect functionality that seemed really different?
They didn't really talk about it too much, did they?
They just said that it was 1080, didn't they?
Yeah.
And it comes. I mean, bundling it as standard is a huge difference, right?
Yes.
Because like Tim was saying about buying one, you will always have a split user base then, so you can't build software with the assumption that people will have it, whereas this clearly from the get-go, the whole UI, the whole user interface is going to be based on the presumption that you will be using Kinect, so I guess if you don't like it, you're still going to be pretty committed to using it.
And it takes things like we had with EA on Xbox 360, with like you'd have changing formations with Kinect, where you go 4-4-2 and it would change your formation or something, or even like that quite embarrassing presentation they did last year's E3 or the year before when they had Mass Effect, and you'd be like squad commands, and it would be like team fall behind me and all that stuff. But I mean, that's in a way, and I actually think it can work, and it's quite a nice thing to have as standard.
The reality is with Kinect is it's not going away. So they see this as their like, I guess their
USP.
Yeah, it is really, and so Kinect's not going away. So it has to work better this time if they're going to bundle it with the console, and if all the developers that get on board with Xbox, or the majority of them, are going to get on board with Kinect as well, it has to work better. And I mean, they showed a little bit of how it tracks your movements and all that kind of stuff, but you'd expect that because it has to be an improvement on the original Kinect. Otherwise, it's going to be, I'm afraid, in terms of games, an abject failure.
Well, the focus there was largely, like I say, Kinect's going to amplify the Ent side of it, which is clearly the push. What did you think of what they showed you of their Ent stuff?
Well, what did they show? I mean, they showed people, they showed an EPG and people watching different kinds of sports and that. But until what the specifics of those deals are by territory, then I think it's unclear. Like, clearly,
you got TV listings. Yeah. They talked about a game DVR, so you record and rewind and all that sort of stuff.
But like, as an example, like over here, like, and I think we talked about it before. Like, I'm pretty happy with how my Sky PVR functions in terms of recording and setting stuff and avoiding clashes and being able to use it on the move. I don't necessarily want a different box to do that for me, so they're going to have to. It'll have to be really compelling.
Oh, I'll stop you there. We're getting a call from our man live in Redmond, Andy Robinson, editor of CVG. We'll just link to him now and we'll see what the buzz is on the 10th floor. Okay, we're joined live by Andy Robinson, editor of CVG, live from a tent or just outside in Redmond. Hello Andy, it's Dan Dawkins. I'm joined by Tim Clark and Tim Weaver.
Hello mate.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It works.
I've just had to move outside. I was going to stand right in front of the console and show it to you all, but it's a bit crowded in there, and we had some hearing problems.
What's the
So you've
console?
got instead.
What's the console like in the flesh, Andy? Any surprise from what we might have seen on video?
It's large. It's comparable in size to probably the original Xbox. It's a big machine. I mean, I had a look at all the slots in the back, and I mean, there's the most telling thing is there's a HDMI in slot, which obviously ties in with the cable TV box mantra that they've kind of been suggesting. So presumably you'll be able to hook up your Skybox and mess around with that stuff using Kinect. I mean, that's been their main mantra, isn't it? Having a connected console that is the whole thing they were aspiring to begin with. The hub in the living room. It's quite impressive how responsive it is, how immediate the experience looks, and that's kind of what development sources have been telling me all along.
Did you get a feel of the pad, Andy? Did they let you have a touch of that?
No, it's all behind glass. I mean, it looks comparable. It probably looks a little bit flatter. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what the new features are about, but they promised a new D-pad and they promised some slightly different triggers and improved battery life. But I'm not sure if we've got the full picture on that. There seems to be, some sort of large touchpaddy thing on the top, unless I'm mistaken. I mean, I might be imagining that to me, but it looks different.
What was the mood like in the room as the kind of announcements were being made? Watching on the stream, you could hear a few people kind of whooping and hollering, but when it cut to the wider picture, it didn't actually seem like a huge amount of clapping was going on. Was that just because you were too busy working, or?
I think it's worth emphasising that it's a very intimate event. I mean, especially compared to the PS4 event where they crammed thousands and thousands of media and investors into this massive venue. I mean, as you can see, it's literally a tent on a football pitch on Microsoft's campus. They've chosen secrecy and security over the venue. There's probably maybe 300, 400 people in there at a guess.
And from speaking to your kind of colleagues, do people seem impressed by what they've been shown?
I've not really had an opportunity to speak to people, to be honest, but I mean, I imagine they're impressed with the platform more than anything. I mean, just like Sony, they're holding off their proper game reveals for E3. I mean, although they showed a few, it was hardly the Halos or Killzones that you want to be launching a console with.
I mean, Andy, you're right there now. I mean, you're chatting to other journalists and people who were there. Is there any kind of talk about the stuff they're not showing, or any information they haven't revealed yet?
I mean, there's some confusion about how the television stuff works. I mean, obviously, it was a little bit US-centric with their reveals in terms of the NFL and ESPN, etc. Obviously, in an hour press conference, they didn't quite have the time to go into the technical details of how it will work. So there was a bit of confusion expressed by some of the peers I was hanging out with. But I mean, as I say, I mean, I haven't had, to be honest, a whole lot of time to get a consensus of what the feeling is here. But I sense that it's similar to PlayStation, where they've ticked all the boxes. They've done everything that the press said they needed to do. But we've not quite, had the wow factor yet in terms of, the big game reveals and, seeing it working properly.
All right, Andy, thanks for that. Well, safe travels back, trying to find out some more scoops and secrets for us, and we'll see them up on the site soon.
Excellent. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Andy.
Cheers,
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, thanks for joining us there, Andy. We're going to talk about now games, or the lack of games. Tim, what did you think about that?
The EA stuff, when I was watching the footage, and admittedly it's being piped down, we were watching it on Xbox Live, so you get some artifacting. It didn't look incredibly sharp, but I don't know, the footage didn't look much different to me than the stuff that we were showing kind of when PS3 and Xbox 360 were revealed. I mean, in fact, do you remember the NFL footage when the players were running through snow? I mean, that looked better. I mean, it turns out it never even ended up looking like that. So it's really hard to judge whether what you're looking at is in-game or even using in-game assets. I'm sure they'll tell you it was, but there's so much camera jiggery pokery this. Unless you start seeing games being live demoed, it's hard to get a really good read at all on. I certainly didn't. You didn't look at it and go, well, that's the next gen. I can't believe what it's doing. It's blown me away. I didn't feel like that.
There's a big theme throughout the entire presentation of it being sort of full of gushy presentation room buzzwords. It would be like, warmth is the new companionship, union through strength, and all these sorts of all these phrases that essentially meant nothing. And even when they introduced EA, finally, 30 minutes in, we finally got games. And even then, we got like sports stars talking about the feel of the game.
Yeah, like
what,
I let my mind drift in those bits.
Yeah.
And you could just think about. I mean, like we were looking at the COD stuff, Tim, and when they were doing the like for like comparisons, you were kind of going, "That looks a bit better."
The whole EA thing, you know, sport stars talking about how it feels to play sport is such a Microsoft thing to do. They've always had that in all their conferences for as way back as I can remember. You know, I remember when they unveiled Xbox 360, it was exactly the same. So they always place a high importance on that kind of thing. So I don't think we should read anything into that other than it was quite dull.
Yeah.
But you know, I agree with Tim and I agree with you, Dan, as well, that I think the footage of those EA games was a little bit, you know, it was like,
It didn't look bad. It
looked fine,
Yeah.
but it was just like, again, you know, the same with Forza 5. Like, as a massive fan of Forza 4, I think it's the best racing game ever made. I know that Forza 5 will be brilliant, but that didn't, for people who haven't been converted yet, or perhaps haven't ever played Forza
And
before.
there's nothing new.
Yeah, you know it through Prestige that it's good, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, in pure footage terms, like Tim said about the EA stuff, it's not like bullshot stuff, but it's fakey camera angles. You can't really in your mind see how it will react. And like purely side by side, and I guess we'll do this on CVG, did it look that much better visually than say Drive Club?
But it's also hard to see what even like in terms of like how you're going to feel while you're playing the game, or what it can do in terms of features. What the difference will be is there was a chap during the Forza bit. The chap said, "Well, we're going to be at a show now, real wear and tear on the track and the surroundings as you drive." And I thought, so what? Like, so what? How would that change at all my experience? I remember going back to the days of like the Getaway on PS2.
Yeah.
And they were saying then, you know, if you knock something over, you come back in a day, it'll have been rebuilt. And even then, it was kind of like a bit nebulous. And there was an interesting thing, I can't remember who said it recently, where they said, look, we've almost reached the point now with realistic faces where it's borderline in irrelevancy. And when I was looking at the Call of Duty old dog versus new dog, I like the new dog. He looked, cool. That was one of my favourite bits. It was a good dog. Yeah. But you were kind of going, what will a furrier dog actually deliver to me in terms of...
and the stuff like, you know, saying that literally the next gen arms race is on, because like, he was saying, well, look at the next gen arms.
He's got dirty fingernails. You're like, so what?
But then, who cares?
But then I guess...
And I love graphics.
Yeah.
But then I guess you could say the same about the PlayStation reveal. I mean,
of course, yeah.
Killzone, it looked beautiful, but it's just shooting men.
But let's bear in mind, say the Killzone footage was actually quite neutrally received, right, by a lot of people who were like, it's more of the same. But I still think that showed more tangible, this is what we're about, promise, than what we got from Microsoft.
You're also in a world where like PC gaming is so like, it's so cutting edge constantly that it's much harder, I think, to. You almost wonder. I feel sorry for the engineers because how were you gonna create any sort of wow? Because this stuff is really well.
Yeah, we've almost hit the ceiling, haven't we?
Yeah, we're going to get wow. And I mean, they talked about the specs of the machine, and what I thought was notable with all of it is the way they weren't really talking to us, the core game nerd crowd, I guess. They were just sort of glossing over the specs, and it was like 8 gig of RAM. Those slides were up in microseconds.
3 operating systems, Dan. That's two more than one.
Don't forget 5 billion transistors.
Yeah, and he literally used the word like it's like
if it had been 4 billion, it would have been a disaster.
It's like it's rocket science or something. It's like you're talking to like an old lady or something. It was really like, you know, technical dazzlery. You know, like I think it was. They're just saying, you know, we're not really obsessed with core gamers. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because I got all obsessed with technical.
But going back to the games thing, is like I think you're right to say that both Sony and Microsoft are partly guilty of it, because you still look and say, where are the genuinely new experiences? I mean, Sony were able to at least point to indies. I mean, no mention of indie gaming at all from Microsoft, and again, that's typical of them, isn't it?
No mention of it, although they did say they'd have 15 exclusives in the first year and 8 brand new games, which I assume they mean brand new IPs. So they are at least. If that's true, they are at least supporting brand new, which is something Microsoft haven't been super good about.
Weren't those 15 from Microsoft Studios as well? Wasn't that specifically?
They haven't been super good about pushing through new IPs. Now people will go, yeah, but what about Gears of War? Yeah, but we've already had 4 Gears of War games now. 4 or 5? Anyway, 4.
The bit that I thought caused real confusion was at the end of the EA reveal, where he said about FIFA Ultimate Team, there was an element of exclusivity he pointed to, and immediately I saw people on the internet going, oh, Ultimate Team's completely exclusive to Xbox One, but that's not how it sounded to me. It sounded like he was talking about there will be an element of Ultimate Team that's exclusive to Xbox.
Even that in itself is big, but it's kind of an add-on thing. The COD maps, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But again, we're assuming that COD's going to roll over to the next gen as big as it was in the last gen. You know, it could be that there's going to be a game that's going to make a play that defines what next gen gaming should be about.
But I wonder whether that means COD DLC on Xbox One or COD DLC across the board on
360 as well.
on 360 as well.
Maybe.
I mean, if it's
so.
both, I don't think we should underestimate how huge that is. I mean, that's big news. You know, I mean, maybe we don't all download every map, but there are people out there, lots of people out there who do.
Well, let's talk about the other bit of big news that slipped slightly under the radar.
Yeah.
There was a piece that published immediately on Wired, and the CBG's reporting now as well off the back of that, saying that in terms of pre-owned, which has been a big discussion in the run-up to it, all the games you play are going to have to be installed mandatorily on your 500 gigabyte hard drive. You won't be you have to install them to play them. Where that makes it interesting is then if you want to sell that game on to a friend or even lend it to a friend, if they want to mandatorily install it to their hard drive, they'll have to pay a fee. Now, we don't know how much that fee is. We don't know what the mechanics of how it pings like some sort of database to go, hello, I'm game 67429 and I've already been used. But essentially, like it points to what we talked about before, Dan, on the previous show about, you can see why EA scrapped their online passes. It does seem like a lockout of the pre-owned market as we previously knew it.
Yeah, it's a control of the pre-owned market. Like, you know, they haven't said it explicitly, but if Tim bought Call of Duty and installed it to his hard drive, if there was no online check-in key, you could just give it to Tim and me and we could both have that game. So it must force you at some point to register your copy.
Must query a database somewhere.
And so that's not always on, and that's something, again, you know, we can talk about because we have got some information on. But, you know, it is wanting you to be in the online universe.
I mean, I think that's where some of the confusion over Always Online has obviously come from, but I think our information for a long time has been that this is the way they're going to go. They've been wanting to block out pre-owned for I don't know how long. Developers want it, publishers want it, so Microsoft are giving it to them.
It's controlling pre-owned, isn't it? Now, whether they charge you full fee for like registering a second-hand copy, I don't know. Whether you pay...
No, I'm sure it'll be less. I mean, that what they want really is not to I think kill the idea of you passing games on or getting cheaper second-hand games. What they want is to have a slice of the pie that they, I think, rightly consider they've cooked, because you know they've spent most, you know, games aren't going to get cheaper to make. A next-gen game is clearly going to cost, a big AAA one is going to cost hundreds, probably of millions of dollars to create. And what they don't like seeing is then that money, when it's recycled, gurgling down a drain that isn't theirs. That's a terrible metaphor. I apologise for it.
No.
But at the moment they're out of that transaction loop completely, both the developer and the publisher.
This was also in the Wired article. We talked about Always On, which obviously they didn't mention at all, and I guess we weren't going to, given what a hot potato it is. But from what we understand, it's going to be possible for, at a publisher's discretion, your game can be always online and utilising the processing power of the cloud, which is like, again, you know, you can't sort of release a game that partially uses the power of the cloud or doesn't. You have to go one way or the other, really. So to that extent, those games would have to be always online.
It's going to be a really hard marketing message. That, I mean, how do you push it out to Joe Public, who has no concept necessarily?
I think you just have some games like I think there'll be almost like a kind of a mixed economy here for a while, and that some games won't have any of it, and some will lean much more heavily on it than others. But a game like Destiny, like Matt was saying, who was on the previous show, you know, is going to be always online. So if they want to, once they've made that decision as a developer, then they can use, if there's that, I think it's Azure infrastructure. Then if they decide they want to use that and they want to use it, I don't know, to stream crazy high-res textures or whatever, then they'll do that. And there's clearly like Tim was saying with pre-owned, there's clearly a cultural shift to wanting that to be the way of doing things. But with pre-owned, I think like for the consumers, I don't think it's because I've seen people already going, oh, PS4's killed Xbox if that's the case. I don't think that is the case, because what they need to do is find a way that for users, for consumers, it's still affordable and still fine. And if the games, if they're selling these, you know, reuse fees for like 20 quid or whatever, or 15 quid, then punters I don't think will mind particularly. The people who will mind will be your HMVs and your games who are already on their asses.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you not think that's the reason that PS4, maybe PlayStation or Sony haven't talked about that necessarily, is because they were waiting to see what Microsoft's play on this kind of thing was? Because
it's definitely possible.
People are saying, oh, you know, PS4's beating Xbox if they go always on or they go down this route. But I mean, Sony haven't really committed to what exactly they're doing there, so it could be that they're doing that too, and in which case they're both...
Well, they can do it, but they're not like the aggressor, as in they're reacting
right,
to what
you'll end up with an
Microsoft
industry standard, isn't it? I don't believe you're going to get Sony out there going, hey guys, we're just cool with it.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe
So let's bring it back to Sony then. Do we think like Microsoft are like winning the mind war with Sony based on that?
No, I thought the Sony conference. Here's the thing: the Sony conference, Sony had a lot more to get to get right this time round. You know, they got a lot wrong in the this current generation, but I would call it the last generation though. They got a lot wrong, and they needed to put a lot right. And that conference they did was big, it was bold, it was ambitious. They announced a lot of stuff that hardcore gamers really wanted, and that's the people, let's be honest, that we are and we talk about. So among us, we're all like, PlayStation as well, whereas Xbox went much more for, as I'd expected them to, more the multimedia, this is what you can do with your TV and your blah and all that kind of stuff, and less on the games. I still think they'll go hard on the games at E3, really hard, but for now they've gone less on that. So from our point of view, you know, all us sitting here who play games a lot, you know, I'd say that PlayStation was a more comfortable and satisfying message, but I think it's probably too early to call, because it's difficult to say at this stage how much people want a sort of pure games console compared to something that will do all things.
Yeah, Tim, what do you think of that?
I think it's a score draw. I think like the Microsoft presentation, I think Microsoft gave a bad presentation about a good machine. I think the Xbox One will be a really good machine, and I think that entertainment stuff, as much as a lot of people will probably scoff at it, especially in the hardcore games community, actually once you're using it, will be really slick and cool to interact with. And there's no doubt they're going to have a load of good games. Some of them will be exclusive, and I don't think there'll be much to choose between the two in terms of power and stuff. So it probably will, for gamers anyway, it will come down to which of those games is more important to you, which is, I think it's going to be an interesting battle, especially with, like, you know, this will be the first generation when you've got likely two machines coming out so similarly spec, such obvious competitors at the same time, pretty much.
What's great for the gamers this time though is that, because you're right, games are going to be so imperative this time, so it's going to be tons more choice out there, and you're going to have a lot more games, and each format is going to need to ensure they get a lot more exclusives and stuff, which is going to be great for gamers.
It's like Tim says, and I think they've both thrown their first punches, but nothing is decided.
No,
it's really going towards E3 and showing us games that are going to make the difference, because there was nothing in that presentation that made me go, that's the killer app, that's the moment. And it certainly wasn't a parade of middle-aged people in badly fitting suits. And I mean, and it really was, the presentation really was, it wasn't aimed at any of us here, it was aimed at sort of this middle mass market person. I think that's entirely what Microsoft want to do. They want to speak to a broader market, maybe because they see it as unifying all their devices and unifying their services. Maybe they think, you know, they just don't think the core games market is in growth anymore.
But the weird thing is that person doesn't watch live streams anyway, does it?
No.
That person will get their information from, you know, USA Today and Yahoo News and places like that, and they'll get like a condensed 300-word version. So maybe
it had the feel of an old media-only CEO looking at the modern world and going, we're all uniting now in this new techno future, like the old world of TV. Here's Mary Tallum.
The problem with that is there's so many subtleties to that machine that, I mean, how do you communicate that to just, you know, like Don Matrick, where he's sitting down with his beige trousers and his beige socks in that NFL chat, which just completely passed me by, right? He is the type of guy that presentation was sort of directed to, but I mean, is he? I mean,
hey, Dan, you're gonna love this new machine, Dan.
Is my dad gonna be able to use that?
Well, that's what I mean. Your dad wasn't in on the live stream right then. I'll say that now. The live stream was watched by hardcore gamers.
He was all over it, tweeting.
Yeah, we'll walk away, and what will happen? That news will disseminate, because it was quite a more mainstream message. It will disseminate to the mainstream newspapers and the tabloids, etc. And eventually, like, you know, our dads will read it and go, well, it may not think anything. They may not think they want that stuff. What they certainly haven't done is delivered a killer game so far, or, you know, true proof of what that machine's all about. But I agree entirely with what Tim says, is that, you know, in terms of the actual machine, PS4 and Xbox, there's probably very little to choose from them. They've just gone down different roads in terms of the marketing. I think Sony could quite equally turn around and say, we do loads of this end stuff. As Microsoft could go, we've got loads of cool games and indie stuff.
I was surprised Microsoft didn't have the sharing stuff. I thought they'd have copied that wholesale from Sony. I think that's probably the distinction at the moment for me, is Sony has that kind of the focus on indies and the sharing, and arguably has better in-house talent, but Microsoft clearly has a better track record of delivering a built-out entertainment service and an online infrastructure that Sony is, you know, singularly kind of failed to do for a while.
I mean, all you can say, for the first glimpse of both machines, you had Sony, you had mad-eyed Mark Cerny, authentic developer guy. First thing you see is Knack. Xbox, we had Don Matrick, and the first thing he showed was a quiz show. So I don't know.
Both losers done.
Yeah, I'll leave it there. Don't forget now, the real war starts at E3. You could believe it. CBG will have obviously loads of coverage. Please subscribe now for coverage of the E3 game show with CBG. More reaction like this, maybe more furious, more full of insanity. I thought that was quite exciting though, for all the nonsense of it. So I look forward to us talking about it again soon. Lots more follow-up on CVG. Thanks for tuning in.